Welcome to another episode of The Great Transition, where we're trying to capture different perspectives that need to be considered while transforming our organizations with hybrid work. I'm your host, Nathan Catino, and today we'll be diving a bit into security. Since I'm no expert in that field, we have Juliana from Toronto to guide us on this awesome adventure. Juliana, welcome, and tell us a little bit about yourself.
Hello, Nathan. Thank you so much for having me today. I really appreciate it. I am presently the Strategic Partnerships Director at Difenda, which is a primarily North America security solution provider. I've been working, though, in security for the vast majority of my career. It's definitely an area that I'm passionate about, and so I'm really excited to speak with you about it today.
Excellent. Well, glad to have you. So let's get right into it. So we're talking about security, maybe even managed security. I'll let you kind of guide us on the adventure you want to take us on. But let's talk a little bit about security strategy, because so much has changed with how many people are at home. Some people are coming in partially. Some people are in full time. Some people have shrunk offices. So much has happened during the pandemic. So how has security strategy actually changed?
Yeah, that's a great question. And you really hit on the topic there that it's changed so much in the last few years, right? Before COVID, hybrid was a thing, but primarily organizations owned the devices that they were giving to people and they could manage where they were working from, were you traveling or whatnot. So everything really, the strategy was typically that everything was centralized. And then when it was COVID, there was the rush to get everybody home and purchasing of endpoints and making sure that they were imaged where possible. But because it was meant to be a short-term thing, we often saw that the strategy was people had to log in with their devices into a VPN or something similar. So they were still on that centralized network, although we did see a lot of people requiring additional firewalling and identifying what they needed to do for their endpoints. When everybody realized this was no longer a short-term thing, and really because businesses have changed so much and employees like yourself and myself have changed so much in that we want to work freely remotely and have a lot more flexibility around the word hybrid, we find that now companies can't go only to that centralized approach. They can't force someone to log into a VPN to have access. And there's so many other changes that I'm sure we'll get into with respect to bring your own device, et cetera, that the strategy has to be more what works for your organization. And I liken it to Lego because I know you love Lego and I see you've got a few pieces back there.
I do.
You have to determine from your box of Legos what's the best fit for your business. Maybe it still is a VPN and centralized strategy, but maybe it's not. So what are you trying to accomplish? And then create your custom strategy. So I like that you said take us on an adventure because it's really, truly different for everybody.
Mm-hmm.
I can't give you a blanket answer, but maybe I can give you some suggestions as we kind of think about how security can help people in this kind of hybrid world.
Sure. No, that's great. That's great thoughts there. So I know there were a lot of concerns early on in terms of, there's more work being done at home. How do we handle confidentiality and top secret documents and things like that? Obviously, there's lots of that in the news lately, but we won't get into specifically. But what do you think when you're talking to customers? What are their top concerns around security?
Yeah, for someone who says that you're not specialized in security, you definitely have a handle on what's going on. And the news is really helpful for my industry because they love to use scare tactics to make people think that security is only one thing. But that's really the challenge with hybrid, right? Security is not one thing. So you have to start with securing your data as an organization, and then you really need to determine where else do you need to secure. So with people working from home or working hybrid and bring your own device has really changed. A lot of companies now are letting people, not just your cell phone, go ahead and purchase whatever you want to work from. So now we've got all different assets and they can't have one similar image. And you're also not having your IT department image them. Likely your employees are setting them up themselves and you don't own that asset. So you can't necessarily lock down the entire laptop. You can't prevent them from doing their online shopping and all the other things that they want to do, or working from their neighborhood coffee shop, be it Tim Hortons or Dunkin' Donuts or, the elusive Starbucks. There's no way that a company can manage where you're working from and the Wi-Fi network or whatnot that you're actually using. So that really opens up so many more attack surfaces for our friends, the hackers, to potentially get access to. And then the other concept that often gets thought about later, and so we are hearing customers talk about it, is if Juliana is working from her local coffee shop because she's decided that's where she's most productive today. Who else can see what she's working on? I'm not in an office anymore. I can't shut the door and make sure that no one comes in to see or hear what I'm reviewing. In leadership, that could be a real problem. Now, I'm obviously going to make smart decisions and I'm not going to go start reviewing people's salary at a coffee shop, but you don't necessarily know. And so it's an adventure that the whole employee, group needs to be on as well around education for security. So that's something we hear about so much too, is how do I educate and not bore through education my employees on making sure that they are aware of their surroundings and who can see their screen and what's on their screen. I've heard stories recently about people losing deals because someone was on an airplane and someone else, a competitor, happened to be sitting beside them and interestingly wasn't wearing their logoed sweater, so they didn't know, and they were working on an RFP, and then somebody else went and responded. All these things are part of security. We often don't think about that, but that's the reality of the hybrid security world that we really need people to think about. And so that's really why you need to determine, what adventure are you on? What are the things that you need to secure? What's most critical to your business? That's, how we hear about different things from different customers.
That's fantastic. It's funny because for those of us that were road warriors, still are road warriors, just not as much. We've kind of experienced a lot of this in the past. The problem now is you have scale. Everyone is everywhere. Yes. Everyone is traveling more. They're working more from coffee shops. Definitely than the pandemic. There's even people walking around on conference calls. I hear them all the time. Yes. And a lot of time they're talking about things they shouldn't be talking about outside in public. Yeah. So it's definitely the if I can use these words, the attack surface area is much worse than it used to be. There's my one security contribution to this podcast. So now you're thinking about, not just intrusion detection and antivirus and malware. There's a whole stack of things to think about. So how do customers manage it? Because enterprises have massive teams that do this. Small businesses do not. So what would be your advice on how do you actually manage this all? How do people do it?
Yeah, it can become really overwhelming is the reality. And, in the few minutes we've had together, you've already picked up on a lot of the different areas that people need to consider. Once you actually get into it, it becomes a lot. And then how do I manage this? Where do I go? It's almost death by options for a lot of people. So you need to really determine where you want to start. And the best way for our customers to handle this overwhelm and manage it is to get help. I'm not saying that because I work in this industry. I'm saying that because it's impossible to do it alone. The reality is, even if you are a large organization and you have a massive team, things keep changing. One of the beauties for me and those of us who work in this industry of security is that it never sleeps and it never stays still. It changes every single day. The hackers, as much as I don't want to admit it, are likely smarter than I am. And therefore, they're consistently trying to find ways to get data, and probably data that I don't think is very important, to be honest, but somehow it's going to get them access to what they are truly trying to get at. And so what we need customers to realize is that you can't manage it all. Maybe you just need someone to come in and give you a roadmap and your team can execute. Maybe you do need full-blown managed security services. All of these things are fine. You just need to realize where you have the support internally and where you need to get help. And then I can tell you there are so many companies out there and individuals who would love to help you. There are companies that have virtual CISOs only, and they can come in and give you a third-party perspective. There are companies like the one I work for where we can help you assess, deploy, manage, and really determine where you need to go from there. There are others that will send you a consultant, right? Maybe you just need somebody for a short period of time to implement something because you've decided what to do, but you don't have that resource. Trying to find security skill set, not very easy.
No,
I know in general, skill set is very challenging to come by in technology, and trying to have everybody keep on top of moving technologies is difficult. Security is not different, but it is specialized. And so if you can't find that person, even if you can find them, you might not necessarily be able to keep them excited about their life every day if they're working on the same projects over and over again, which is why we see a lot of movement in this industry. You really need to determine where you can get that help and the best way to execute it. So really, choose your own adventure is the only way I can describe security, because there's so many options, but don't go it alone.
Yeah. I just think with everything happening in the world today and the with the amount of issues happening, with the amount of recalibration and things you need to think about, the next big malware thing that's out there, right? Like I don't know how small organizations can keep this together without outsourcing it. I just don't understand how they'll be able to do it. So, my guess is that if they're not already, most small businesses are already using some level of managed security, and medium businesses for as well. And global enterprises, obviously, it's a completely different group. Some of them have thousands of IT people, right? So it's a bit different. So we've talked a lot about security in general. We've talked about managed security, and obviously that's something that you really want to consider, especially if you have a smaller team and you're in a smaller business. We've talked about top concerns that people need to think about, and then obviously just the makeup of what's on people's minds, which is fantastic. But we don't have all day to talk about this, and I know you would love to talk about this all day. I would as well.
Most definitely.
So if you had to have our audience take away one thing they should do, what would that be?
That's a really great question. One thing is always difficult, not only because I love to talk on this topic, but I'd say, one of the things I really love most about security and about consulting, which is where I've always been, I've never been on the customer side for a reason, is solving this problem for customers is a passion project. Yeah. And really the way I do it every time, which is the one takeaway, is find out what you have. You can't determine where to go unless you know what you have. So what you have is not just, what firewalls did I buy? That's a component of it, right? What technologies do you have today? What is the licensing structure? When are they up for renewal? All those things are very important. But also, what do you have in terms of people and skill set available to you to support you, either internally or in your network or providers maybe that you're already working with? And then most importantly, what do you have in terms of assets? What do you need to protect? What type of model of hybrid, because it has so many different definitions, what type of hybrid is your employee system working on? What does your business look like? Are you based only in Canada where there's certain privacy laws? Are you, North America? Are you global? How do your people work together? Like, what do you have today really sets that baseline to then determine from there, what do you need to do next? And it'll also help you prioritize, because the reality with security, which a lot of people don't want to accept, is that there is inherent risk and you will have to accept some level of risk. But to determine what level of risk your employee situation and your organization is willing to accept, you need to know what you have. So really, it's that process that is very important, and taking the time to do that will mean that everything else will be very easy. And then especially if you're a small or medium-sized business where you have limited resources, and the reality is limited funds, because that's how every business functions, you can better determine where to allocate those resources and those funds. And you can get more out of what you're trying to accomplish by finding the right solutions, be it services or products, that are going to give you the most out of that for what you are trying to do. So it's a multi-stage one-point answer, because I can't give you something clear. It's just not what I do. Sure, that. Anybody who knows me, I can't give you a yes or no. But really, if you can figure out what you have, then you can get the support you need to get the right solution in place.
Well, there's definitely a lot to consider around security when it comes to hybrid work. So, Juliana, just a big thank you. Thank you for spending some time with us, sharing your thoughts and perspectives on this super important topic that I know is hard to jam pack into 10 minutes or 20 minutes. But hey, it's always great to see and talk with you, Juliana.
Thank you so much, Nathan. It's always great to chat with you. And when you let me do most of the talking, we all know I'm both happy, so it's good to go. It was a great opportunity to chat about this topic. I'd love to continue chatting with anybody who wants to talk more, so please feel free to reach out at any time.
Thanks, Juliana. Well, there you have it, folks. You want to make sure you rethink and reevaluate your cybersecurity plan as you develop and update that hybrid strategy. So hopefully you all got a few tips today that you can use to guide your organization as you move fast and furious down this path. That's it for today. Until next time, this is Nathan Catino signing off.